This final session is called Advancing Advanced Manufacturing. And I think we're recognizing that this is both about driving technological innovation and implementing it for patient benefit. And I've been pleased to hear the patient come up on a number of occasions this afternoon. And in this session that's coming up, we'd like to answer questions that will help us understand what is industry's ambition from a global perspective. What do we have to do to improve medicines manufacturing? And very specifically from a UK perspective, what is the UK's ambition? So our first speaker this afternoon is Samantha Atkinson. Samantha is the Interim Chief Quality and Access Officer at the MHRA. She's held several roles in the agency, including Business Transformation Director, Deputy Director for Inspection, Enforcement and Standards, and the Scientific Director of the British Pharmacopoeia Commission, with responsibility for British Pharmacopoeia and Laboratory Services Group. I'm going to move on now to Andy Evans. Andy is the Vice President of Clinical Manufacturing and Supply at AstraZeneca. He's worked across supply chain management, major capital and IS projects, engineering, manufacturing management and site management in his career. And he is currently the chairman of the Medicines Manufacturing Industry Partnership. We have Tina Flatter. Tina is an advocate for patient-driven R&D and believes that biopharmaceutical product development should be better aligned with the requirements of patients, and advanced technologies bring opportunities for precision, agile research and development, and making novel therapeutics more economically feasible. Tina has a PhD in pharmaceutics and worked as a principal in PwC's pharmaceutical industry group, and has followed that with varied program roles in biopharmaceutical development. The second additional person is Professor Sir Jim MacDonald. He's the Principal and Vice Chancellor at the University of Strathclyde and President of the Royal Academy of Engineering, and he's ultimately my boss. He co-chairs with the First Minister of Scotland the Scottish Government's Energy Advisory Board. He's co-chair of the Independent Glasgow Economic Leadership Board. He holds several senior business appointments with organisations including the Weir Group, the Scottish Power plc, the UK National Physical Laboratory, and the UK Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult. And he chairs or participates in several senior committees related to research, economic development, and education. And finally, but by no means least, let me introduce Charlie Cooney, who is the Robert T. Haslam Professor Emeritus of Chemical Engineering at MIT and the founding faculty director of the Deshpande Center for Technological Innovation. Charlie's academic career is focused on biotech and pharma process design, operation, economics, and control. And continuous processing has been a recurring theme throughout his research. He's been involved as a founder, advisor, or board member of over 25 companies, and he was a member of the FDA Pharmaceutical Science Advisory Committee from 2003 to 2006, and the chair from 2005 to 2006. And Charlie sits with Larry, Alistair, myself, and others on the ISCMP steering committee. So if we can gather the panel together, and I don't know if there are any additional questions to come in from the audience. I'm sure there could be some additional questions coming into this session. But I'm going to start off with one, if I can, about the patient, because I think we've heard that at the end of the day, the patient is central to the work that we do. So my first question to the panel is, what does the patient want from new medicines? And can advanced manufacturing technologies help achieve this? And should we engage as a community more with the patient? And Tina, I don't think you'll be surprised if I come to you first to answer that.
Thanks very much, Clive, and thank you for the invitation. It's also nice to be virtually back in Scotland. My last monoclonal company was in Edinburgh, heavily supported by Scottish Enterprise, so good call out Scotland there. I work as an interface between patient R&D organisations and pharmaceutical developers at the moment, and I'm at the moment involved with a collaboration with a number of quite large R&D patient organisations such as Cure Parkinson's Trust, Action Duchenne, who I represent, and so on. So we conduct R&D ourselves. But we appreciate that we can't go anywhere near supply chain, and it's down to you guys when it comes to that. So what do our patients want? Well, first of all, we want to be consulted because patients know an awful lot about the products that they are going to be using. And I think my only criticism that I'm going to level at pharma guys today is really to say, don't be frightened to consult patients. You can go through patient R&D organisations to do that. You don't have to break any rules. There's a sort of a safety barrier there where you can speak to and engage with knowledgeable people who are able to reflect on the usefulness of the way in which products are going to be adopted and used. Secondly, I think what do patients want? Well, they want their products to be made available to them. And, we know in patient organisations that patients follow R&D very closely now. They're constantly Googling their condition and downloading papers and, going on to biosieve and looking at, peer reviewed stuff. So, really people are very up to speed and educated. And so they can see novel treatments coming down the pipeline. They want them tomorrow, they want them today. So really it's having these things that are going to be made available. And I think advanced manufacturing is one of the cornerstones that will enable supply chain of these novel products to be a reality. It's taken, 20 years more for monoclonal antibodies to really be everyday things that people are treated with. And, let's not wait that long for some of these RNA treatments, etc. So they want them to be available at not an exorbitant cost, so they don't feel they're going to be subjected to postcode lottery or limitation because of their age or whatever else. So they want them to be available to them, and they want them to be supplied in a way that they are not going to run out. And then lastly, they do want them to be easy to use. And again, come back and consult. We've got patients with chronic conditions. You've got a subcutaneous formulation for this, an intramuscular formulation for that, a nasal spray for something else. I mean, for goodness sake, people, So think about the end user. The end user isn't the GP. It isn't the pharmacist. It's the end user who takes your product. So consult, please, would be my answer.
It's a great answer. Thank you. Samantha, you were mentioning the patient. Do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would say quite a lot actually. So firstly, I think one of the key things that when we engage with the public and patients is all about trust and confidence. And trust and confidence, of course, comes through lots of different things. So whether it's a safe product, consistent quality, whether it's available, all of those different things, the regulatory approach to it in terms of making sure that it is a safe and effective product. There is something, I totally agree around the ease of use, and indeed things like lifestyle decisions, and certainly something we're looking at. So quite often, questions that might come from the patient is, well, can I take it with this other medication, or can I have a glass of wine in the evening if I'm taking this particular thing? So really trying to provide that level of information for the patient as well, I think is really important and something we're certainly looking at. Consultation, which has already been mentioned, I totally agree with, and indeed we've got, as I said earlier, this innovative pathway which really does require the innovation passport holder to actually engage with patients, and this is all the way through. So in terms of what have they done to engage with patients even before they've got into clinical trials, how are they engaging them through that process, what further engagement would be beneficial to the whole process and indeed the outcome and the product at the end. So there's a whole raft of things that we're making sure that we see that engagement come through. And this could be, of course, for very new products, I don't know, ATMPs, or it could indeed be for new indications of existing products, dexamethasone for COVID, for example. We need to make sure it's built in all the way through, and that's patient-centric approach really is being built into the agency's future. And I totally agree with all the comments that have been said so far, and patients must remain at the centre of all our decision making. Thanks.
Can I add this as a question of my own, if it's okay? But do you think that real-world evidence has a big role to play in understanding the patient's perspective of how they feel on the drug, not just the how it impacts on their physiology, but how they feel?
It's interesting. I think there's always a debate between real-world evidence and real-world data, is there not? So I think that's the starting point. But it certainly could potentially help, and we are looking to see how we can use CPRD, so that's the Clinical Practice Research Data Link, going forwards in exactly this sort of thing. I think there's a big job to be done in terms of connecting different pieces of data. I talked about lifestyle data earlier, and that's a factor as well, but the reliability and credibility of some of the data equally comes into play when you start playing around with data. So a lot to be done, I would say. I don't think there's a simple answer to that question.
Okay. Any other points that people would want to make about the patient centricity?
I would just add one point, Clive. That as a patient, I would sum up my interest as being quality and access. And I agree very much with the earlier comments. And in the context of the meeting today, this afternoon, the advanced manufacturing and continuous manufacturing really helps address both of those. With the focus on quality and the focus on patient access to the drugs that they need and they want. So I think we're doing the right thing. We're still in the early stages of doing it.
I'm totally in agreement, Charlie. And on a line similar to that, I got another question coming here, which says, do we focus enough energy on the translation of advanced manufacturing technology into commercial manufacturing in comparison to the effort in medicine's discovery and development? So perhaps I can address that to you, Charlie, and Jim, and Andy.
Well, I would start with the simple answer: no. I don't think enough attention is paid. And the pandemic was a wake-up call that biotech and pharmaceutical manufacturing is on the critical path between delivering the benefits of science to the patient. And we need to continue to be diligent about how we underscore and build the infrastructure, both in manufacturing and supply chain, to assure resilience. So we've had a wake-up call, and I think that all the speakers today made many points very critical to how we can build greater reliance on manufacturing in order to build resilience into access of drugs to the patient.
So Jim, thanks, Charlie. So Jim, you're on mute.
There's the first £20 fine. The first £20 fine of the afternoon, Clive. And as a humble electrical engineer, I'm loath to give too much wisdom to this very august audience. I'll just back up very briefly, Clive, on that patient piece, and I shouldn't talk when we've got experts there, but let me give you a very quick analogy before I go to manufacturing. The whole net zero debate, which is driving international governments, and in my city of Glasgow, we're hosting COP26, so it's very much a topic of concern. The whole net zero is driven by what's called the energy trilemma, which is the competing pressures of security, cost, and reliability. But people are realizing that the fourth vector, which is also competing, is customer acceptability and adoption. So unless people's behaviours, unless people's approval, unless people's engagement in that net zero journey is had, then it won't happen. And I think there's a broad analogy there for this migration towards personalised medicine and the use of advanced technologies. But to manufacturing in particular, CMAC and MMIC are in and around our real estate at the university on 2 innovation districts. Our questioner asked about commercialisation. I think starting out with a systems perspective of what's trying to be achieved is key. Getting that collective objective by the OEMs connected heavily into the academic expertise, such as you have on the call today, is key. But ultimately, seeing how we drive the IP into not only supporting existing companies and supporting and enhancing the ability for the supply chain partners to engage in innovation, but also, quite frankly, to create commercialization and commercial opportunities. So in many ways, if you let me say this, Clive, if it's baked in from the start, commercialization shouldn't be seen as something that happens way down the line. In many ways, we can coexist in high quality basic research. It's engagement and translation into product systems and services. But as long as you take that systems perspective, you can capture and exploit commercial value as you go. And it really needs that collective wisdom of an industry sector coupled with strong academic contribution. And last but not least, if we're going to stay in triplets, the magic triple helix of industry, academia, and public sector support that can provide a lot of the capital infrastructure, but also, quite frankly, make it happen and then stand back and let the industry and academic innovators get on with it, with an accountable framework around it, of course.
Okay. Andy, you have something to add into that?
I think it's just to build on a couple of the points. I think I heard an interesting comment from an oncology patient recently who said, it's the whole pandemic has crystallized the conversation around speed and access and manufacturing is on the critical path. But I just want to tell you, there's been an oncology pandemic for years, which was a bit of a sort of wake-up call in our discussions, because it kind of made the point that people are tracking oncology studies all the time because people are dying as they regress through cancer. And I think the point she was making was, you need to speed up. You just need to get these things much, much, much quicker through to us, because people are out there dying, because we're not able to accelerate things through fast enough. So I thought it was quite a strong message from somebody whose family has been hit by certain gene issues that obviously translate into a higher predisposition for cancer. So that was a patient speaking directly to us and really giving us a bit of a wake-up call, I think, about the importance of speed. And I think now CMC is massively on the critical path. It's like, it's the thing, because you're accelerating clinical development and you're trying to accelerate difficult to make things. So I think the advanced manufacturing agenda is really important at the moment for patients. If you're going to really deliver at speed, it's all about really being able to manufacture at scale and at speed, or you're going to slow it all down.
That's a really good example to put forwards, and I think we focused a lot on continuous the afternoon, but speed is a real deliverable out of continuous manufacturing, and the way that helps you get products through development and manufacturing to the patient quicker is absolutely critical. And we've heard from the regulators this afternoon is that they're very supportive and encouraging of this innovation, and they want to work with us to help it make it happen. And I'm delighted to hear that this afternoon. I know Sir Jim needs to go in 4 minutes' time, roughly. And just before he goes, I'd like to ask one question, and that is, what can the academic community do more of or do differently to support a thriving medicines manufacturing sector?
Oh my God, I'll need more than 4 minutes for that, Clive. I'll cancel my next appointment. Very briefly, and again, may I say that this conference today is terrific. I think it's a very marked point on the journey to this collective approach to advanced manufacturing. So what can the academic sector do? I'm going to twist that a little bit, if you don't mind, Clive, because I come back to this systems perspective. It really is about collaboration across industry, academia, and our government partners. So it's easy to flip this out and make it a single vector. In fact, the key thing here is collaboration. I think I've heard each of the speakers in different ways. So, I mean, let's look at, if I may, just a couple of very brief examples. And an example, the first one I'll choose, there have been a number of people in your conference today who have been involved in it. Take the vaccines task force, for example. Dave's been involved, Ian McCubbin, many others. I sit on the Prime Minister's Council for Science and Technology, and Patrick's been sharing with us some very good lessons learned through a very difficult set of circumstances. And what are the headline lessons learned? From the outset, it involved experts, industry and academia. Infamously, we've heard bad comments in recent years about who needs experts. Well, trust me, we need experts that's found around good evidence, good data and good capability. So the Vaccines Task Force had that. It embraced and acknowledged risk. That's hard sometimes for the public sector to get their head around because of the public accountability. But risk has to be understood, has to be embraced, and then has to be managed properly. Also, it was linked ultimately from the outset to delivery and procurement. And that's what I was saying earlier. It took that systems approach, didn't leave commercialization or production or supply chain to the last minute. It was thought about from the outset. So large companies, the supply chain partners were thought about, and it had a clear outcome in mind with a plan for a long-term legacy, not least of which a significant and lasting investment in pharmaceutical manufacturing in the UK. And we've seen some of the outcomes, I won't say follies, I'll say outcomes from over the past 30 years, the UK being denuded of manufacturing capability. We're seeing the risks that brings. And last but not least, single point accountability and rapid decision making. And what I would say about this, there has to be confidence within and trust across these partnerships. That doesn't mean to say the dynamics won't change from time to time. And the key thing is to see academia as part of the association, as part of the partnership, not as a supply chain partner that comes in with bright ideas and bright people. We'll do that all the time. There has to be that co-equal approach to industry leadership, drive, and quite sharply the professionalism on delivery and investment, and having that mutual respect with the academic community and indeed our governors in government working through it. And one other one I would mention as an engineer, the Ventilator Challenge UK. Now there's a remarkable example where cross-sectoral multidisciplinary activity was triggered very quickly. And what I would say to this audience respectfully, please have a look at cross-sectoral activities. There is much to be learned from other sectors, aerospace, automotive, that digital transformation and Industry 4.0. I'm sure that's, what we heard from MMIP and others, there'll be lots of cross-learning, but don't just have a look over the wall and then move on. Forge partnerships, realise that multi-sector collaboration has enormous value. And in the Ventilator Challenge, who do we have in there? Airbus, BAE Systems, Rolls-Royce, Siemens, Smiths, Unilever, Thales, many of them competitors, but when it came to a big idea and tackling an opportunity, they managed to get that rapid decision making, and of course they'll ultimately compete commercially. And I would say there's lessons learned through a hard set of circumstances in the past year. And I think your industry, if I may say, can now take advantage of lessons cross-sectoral. And I think one of our colleagues mentioned this already in the basis of attracting talent. Science is part of the lingua franca these days. Everyone's talking about it. Not enough people are talking about engineering, I have to say, but as president of Royal Academy of Engineering, I'll see what I can do about that. But science is there at the front, attract talent, but make sure that it's in the vocabulary of government and work as a partnership and learn lessons. And I could give you some examples from aerospace, as I hold the Rolls-Royce chair in electrical power, but you've got too many experts in your own domain for me to distract you.
Jim, those were two great examples. And I know that you've been with us all afternoon, and I know that you've got a pressing engagement. So thank you for those. We're going to take those comments. And I'm going to ask that question about what can the academic community do to the rest of the panel. Who would like? Charlie, would you like to go next?
Sure. As an academic, it's a great question to respond to. First of all, I agree with the points that Jim very, very much. Our core business model is around education and research. And we can use that core business model of the university to do a number of things that I think we could do better. In education, to Jim's point, I think the importance of interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary education, giving our students the confidence to cross barriers, boundaries that they feel uncomfortable with. But there's so much to be gained from doing that. We do, I think, a really good job in the university of teaching our students how to solve closed-ended problems. Give my students in my class at MIT a problem that requires a complicated analytical solution, bang, they get it. But give them an open-ended problem, which is what, of course, we all deal with. That's much harder. And I think we could do a better job in teaching students how to solve those open-ended problems, particularly when you have to do it as a team, and particularly when you have to cut across multiple disciplines. And specific examples of that are in the process science to support advanced manufacturing, regulatory science to support the translation of scientific discovery into the principles that industry and regulators can use in drug product development, drug product manufacturing, and approval. And I think we can also serve a bridging role in academia, bridging interactions between industry and government. It's part of that triple helix. And the more that we as researchers and educators are focused on the right problem, are focused on teaching our students how the principles that are at the core of our disciplines help solve those challenging, impactful, real world problems. I think that helping to connect the dots between the different players and that bridge is a role that we could continue to do better at.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree. Tina, what do you think?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think that patients in the UK in particular have benefited enormously from academic clinical collaborations. And I think that's moved the plot along hugely in terms of trials and access to really great, new studies. And so I would imagine that, the bolt-on to that could be access through those kinds of academic clinical collaborations through trials to helping to, take part in studies where novel and advanced treatment technologies are being used. And, years and years ago, when I had a lot more student clinical trials, we always sort of went to studies with quite basic therapeutic designs because it was all about the therapeutic agent and it wasn't about, what you packaged it in. And now the package is really important. We get that now. So, I think it'd be great, coming back to this triumvirate idea, is to make sure that trials in which patients are engaged are being run in this collective and collaborative way, where the best technologies and the best brains are all sort of working together. And coming back, unfortunately, to this year, into COVID, etc. I mean, the collaboration, idea and mantra is one of the most positive, bright sparks around the back of this cloud, really. That it's a silver lining that I hope will have a massive difference going forward.
Thank you. We've got 4 minutes left in this section, and I'm going to ask a question. Perhaps I can just get a sort of a 1 minute answer from each of you. We saw on Larry's slide, I think that there are 7 products approved by the FDA using continuous manufacturing. So can I ask you as a panel, what do you see as the main, perhaps this is not for you, Tina, but for the other 3, what do you see as the main reasons for the slower than expected adoption of continuous manufacturing, and how can we accelerate it? And Andy, I'm going to come to you first.
I mean, I think a couple of things. I mean, it's not a panacea, so I think that's probably the first thing, is you won't use it everywhere. So, batch manufacturing will still have its place. But I think one of the other reasons why it's perhaps slow is it's harder. I mean, if we cut to the chase, it's not as easy as somebody who's run on a chemical manufacturing plants, mixing stuff up in a batch stirred reactor in glass line vessel and taking it out at the end is not that hard. I mean, to be honest, when I joined as a chemical engineer, it was pretty easy stuff. Running a bespoke continuous manufacturing with a high-tech control system on it is a bit more tricky. So, that's part of the reason is it says advanced manufacturing, losing the name. So I think as we get better at it, and I'm speaking as a chemical engineer, as we get a bit more investment in the capabilities in people and the tech, I think we will just do more of it and see it. But it's quite tricky. That's the bottom line, Clive, I think. And when you're developing a drug, you don't want to risk it. You tend to go for the easy default, stick it in a batch reactor, because if you try it in a continuous process, it doesn't work. At that point, you're not looking too clever in the development process because you've messed it up, would be the view.
Let me break my rules and ask Samantha and then Charlie for answers, and then come back to that with a question for Samantha. But Samantha, do you want to answer that one? Do you understand what are the reasons for slower adoption?
Well, I don't think I could talk for specific companies or industry per se, but I could sort of hazard a guess at what might be some of the reasons behind it, and perhaps some of what we hear through the grapevine maybe. But things like, I guess, as what's just been said, sometimes it's a bit harder. Change is different and difficult, and it's everyone finds that a bit more challenging. It is a new thing, I guess. We don't have that many people doing, for example, continuous manufacturing, and there will be sort of regulatory hurdles, even if they are streamlined and expedited. So of course we know that there will potentially be parallel running if you're introducing continuous manufacturing, but the point is the prize at the end obviously is bigger than the challenge at the start. And I think talking to us and continually engaging with us is the way to go, because we can help progress that. I would say I think there's still a little bit of hesitancy, and I think you mentioned it earlier, actually, Clive, that people aren't that keen to come and talk to the regulator. But I'm saying today we're very open to come and have discussions with us about these things, because we would very much welcome to encourage and enhance those different processes and bring new technologies down the line. But what we're looking for is just the same quality of product coming out the other end. And making sure that the outcome and the patient safety is absolutely at the heart of all of that. So if we can do anything in our gift to support, we certainly will.
Thank you. And Charlie?
Well, to answer that, I'm going to take my academic hat off and put my corporate board member hat on, because I think that the barrier has been an inadequate technological justification of the business case. The business case, if you're going to ask for an investment of several $100 million to a board, the business case has to be clear. And that has to be built around quality, speed, cost, flexibility, and of course, risks of regulatory approval. But when I look at the regulators, I see regulators as being very open to innovation. And I don't see that as the barrier. I see the barrier within the industry itself. And I think we need to do a better job of taking the experience that has been quite good, as Larry spoke, is continuing to get better, as we heard, in terms of the science and the technology, to justify the business case to make it an appropriate investment. I heard two things today that further enhance that. One is the opportunity to use environmental impact, the business of environmental impact and the cost savings to further reinforce that business case. And I also am hearing the importance of advanced manufacturing improving resilience. And resilience, the pandemic has taught us, is our weak spot. So I think we need to bring the technology, the science, the risk understanding together to make that business case, which I believe is there, and a number of companies have gotten approval for these multi-$100 million investments, and we need to do we need to continue to do that. We need to learn how to intensify our processes, to integrate them together, to use better digital strategies for interrogation. And we're on the right path. We're in the 5th decade of biopharmaceuticals, and I think we're on the right path, and we're beginning to see the benefits of it.
That's a good answer. I'm not going to ask. I was going to ask, and I'll tell you what the question was, and Samantha, you can answer it another time. Andy mentioned putting new products and new technology together is high risk. Is there a way of making it easier to get second generation development through the approval system? I don't answer that, but I think that might be one area that could help us accelerate adoption. But I've well exceeded my time. I know that there's a poll going live in just a moment or two that's going to seek recommendations to government and regulators. But I'd like to hand over to Alistair, if I can do, to wrap up the afternoon. And I want to thank you all very, very much indeed for your contribution in speaking and in this panel. Thanks a lot. Alistair.
Thanks a lot, Clive. I guess just in the final few remarks in terms of, I think, some of the key messages we've heard today, it's clear, the fundamental importance of medicines manufacturing. Manufacturing it's the gatekeeper in terms of allowing patients to access and continue to access the benefits of advances in medical science. And I think through the sessions today, I think just reinforcing the drive to accelerate the development and introduction of new medicines using and through our manufacturing assets. And that drive to accelerate is both clear and I think urgent. The path forward perhaps remains complex. We've heard around a whole suite of different technologies, organizations, the different needs and demands of different sizes and types of organizations across the supply chain. So technology, is in there and will continue to evolve, the role of digitalization, but of course skills, being highlighted in a number of ways throughout the day, again and again. Perhaps one of the skills that, is going to be important for all of us, is the need to become experts in collaboration. We've heard, the need to engage with patients, the triple helix, academia, industry, government. We've heard from Samantha's talk around, the relationship between regulators and the efforts and activities around harmonization there. Collaborating across TRLs, across technologies, across and within our own organizations, across different groups, differently perhaps than they have traditionally been done. So I think, there's a call to all of us, I think, to redouble our efforts, challenge ourselves to work together, to find ways to do that really efficiently, to highlight and promote the work that we're all doing. Again, Samantha, I think, said, the time is now. If it's not now, when is it? So I think grasp the challenges, find ways to work together, realize the opportunities that the technologies that are coming through now offer, and some of the emerging areas that Andy highlighted in his presentation that we're maybe better at implementing, developing, and realising the benefits from them in future. So I think a hugely, exciting set of presentations, talks, throughout all of the sessions, really inspiring in terms of the opportunities, the drivers, and some of the great progress that's already been done. So I guess on behalf of the International Symposium for Continuous Manufacturing of Pharmaceuticals, the steering team, the UK meeting organising committee, I'd also like to thank all of the speakers for their contributions.